Hello, it's the weekend and I'm feeling a bit funny, so this presentation might go a bit funny. In fact, I feel a bit more than funny, so let's see how we go. US headed the way of Italy, Greece feds Fisher. The United States is headed the way of debt crisis racked Italy and Greece unless US lenders make more concerted effort to fix the national deficit. A top Federal Reserve official said on Friday Dallas Fed President Richard Fisher told a meeting of business leaders they should take the Occupy Wall Street movement seriously because too many people are out of work. He urged them to lobby lawmakers to craft a fiscal solution to the nation's debt problem, which is creating uncertainty and holding back business investment. Otherwise, social unrest could result, Fisher said. Now, I've already changed my mind. I was just going to go through these without comment, but there are different things in here. The Fed should run a paper, in other words, an analytic paper, and work out MMT, basically. Right, stop. Fellas, Occupy Wall Street should be taken seriously. Many people are out of work. They should write an analytical paper, working out if the Fed can actually do anything about people being out of work. And after they've done that, they can do another analytical paper on whether the government can do anything about people being out of work. And then run another analytical paper on whether the Fed and the government working together can do anything about people being out of work. And then he goes on about creating uncertainty. Could run an analytical paper working out whether companies really go, uncertainty, I'm not going to invest because of uncertainty. Or really they go, the economy's crap, I'm not going to invest in going into a crap economy. And then they can run an analytical paper seeing if the Fed and the government together can do anything about a crap economy. Now, this is 2101 Cedar Springs Road, Suite 1400, Dallas, Texas. So this is Heyman Capital Management, Kyle Bass. If you don't know who he is, doesn't matter, does it? Let's start top right. When a nation's debts become many multiples of central government revenues, a non-linear relationship develops that becomes insurmountable because expenses grow faster than revenues, even in inflationary growth environments. We believe the debts of the following nations, among others, are not sustainable in the current economic environment: Greece, Italy, Japan, Ireland, Iceland, Japan, Spain, Belgium, Japan, Portugal, France, and have we mentioned Japan? The United States is quickly approaching the zone of insolvency, but can avoid it, with massive spending cuts and severe reductions in entitlements into the future. But don't hold your breath. Right, Kyle Bass. That's to remind me to come back to Japan. Remind me if I forget. Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, analytical paper. Why some European countries and not the US? Question mark. These days it seems just a matter of time until we hear about the next Eurozone country whose interest rates on sovereign debt will start soaring. What started with Greece, Portugal and Ireland has since spread to countries of greater economic importance such as Spain and Italy. The United States is dealing with serious debt issues too, but while Spain and Italy face increased borrowing costs, the interest rate on US government debt is at all-time lows. And a little chart. The size of the 10-year government bond spread between the US and EZP. EZP, did we not have that at the top? Okay, EZP is European Zone Problems, or forget what they would call them. But those are the pigs, basically. There are several other reasons that might explain why rates are still so low in the US. Oh, I've missed one out. He said something silly at the top as well. Yeah, I'm highlighting this because it's silly. First, the Irish banks know all too well banking balance sheet problems can quickly turn into sovereign problems. So he's saying that the US banks are so much better than the European banks, so government debt is cheaper in the United States, as in cheaper interest rate. True, but bloody hell. A second factor explaining the difference in interest rates has to do with the demographics of sovereign debt holders. Again, it's true. The US demographics is better than most all European countries. But bloody hell. Another reason for the interest rate spread is the safe haven factor. We're America. But he doesn't say what a safe haven means. Finally, we will finish with the word credibility. A security does not bear the safe haven moniker by chance. The reason US Treasury securities command lower interest rates than, say, Zimbabwean government securities is partly because both the US government and the Federal Reserve have each made credible commitments. The government pledges to keep the debt at sustainable level, and the Federal Reserve assures that it will not monetize away the debt. Now, have you picked up yet that this fella is a cretinous moron? Let's just run that last bit just to emphasize it, just in case you got bored and dropped off. The government and the Federal Reserve have each made credible commitments. The government pledges to keep the debt at sustainable level, and the Federal Reserve assures that it will not monetize away the debt. The reason that the US government debt interest rates are so low is because the market is convinced that if push comes to shove, the Federal Reserve will monetize away the debt. Now, who's this fella talking to? He's not talking to the public. The public don't read papers like this. Anyway, moving on, before I get too angry with these people. Ken Rogoff, writing in Project Syndicate, is modern capitalism sustainable? I am often asked if the recent global financial crisis marks the beginning of the end of modern capitalism. It is a curious question, because it seems to presume that there is a viable replacement waiting in the wings. The truth of the matter is that, for now at least, the only serious alternative to today's dominant Anglo-American paradigm are other forms of capitalism. Continental European capitalism, which combines generous health and social benefits with reasonable working hours, long vacation periods, early retirement, and relatively equal income distributions, would seem to have everything to recommend it, except sustainability. China's Darwinian capitalism, with its fierce competition among export firms, a weak social safety net, and widespread government intervention, is widely touted as the inevitable heir to Western capitalism, if only because of China's huge size and consistent outsized growth rate. Yet China's economic system is continually evolving. Now, I've kind of touched on this in the week, haven't I? That talking about the Eurozone, we know about its unsustainability for various reasons, mainly being the euro currency, which constrains it, and the idea that I think that Western capitalistic nations will move more towards managed economies for various reasons. I'll move on. There's so much to talk about. I could go on for hours. You wouldn't want me to, would you? Update 2. Lacquer dissented against Fed liquidity move. Fed's Lacquer says liquidity plan fiscal policy. Loans to European banks cheaper than those to US banks. Lacquer seen as inflation hawk to vote on FOMC in 2012. They move these things around, but he came in to vote on this because one of the other voters was off or ill at the time, so he came in to do the voting. Doesn't matter. He said, I dissented on the vote because I opposed the temporary swap arrangements to support Federal Reserve lending in foreign currencies. Lacker said in an emailed statement. Such lending amounts to fiscal policy, which I believe is the responsibility of the US Treasury. The Federal Reserve has provided and can continue to provide sufficient dollar liquidity through purchase of US Treasury securities, he said. Now, this is the one that I kind of semi-planning to try and explain to you, because you wouldn't have understood a bloody word of that. Because nobody will have told you. I'll do this last one and then I might come back to it. Euro was doomed from the start, says architect of single currency. Exclusive my arse. Former president of the European Commission, Jacques Delors, declares the current generation of European leaders have failed to address the euro's fundamental problems. And basically Delors was just about the central moving force for the euro. There was Kohl and Mitterrand and other people that went along, but Delors was and now he's saying the design was crap and the modern politicians haven't sorted it out. Bang my head on the keyboard for the whole of this. Right, let's go back to this. I dissented on the vote because I opposed the temporary swap arrangements to support Federal Reserve lending in foreign currencies. These liquidity things that you will have heard of vaguely during the week that made the markets go woohoo. Now, how can I explain them to you so you'll be interested? I'll tell you what they are, should I? Where to start? The European banks, when everything was woo-woo rah-rah, 2007, let's say, they were into buying all sorts, cranking up their balance sheet on the asset side. Lots of they'd bought up everything in Europe, so they were buying up this American shit, this mortgage-backed securities and all sorts of acronym paper and all sorts of stuff. So they needed dollars to buy it. So they've got lots of dollar loans, dollar assets, but they've got the new capital requirements mean that they've got to do a few things to get their balance sheet in order. One of the things they can do is sell stuff. They're buying and selling stuff between each other. Some selling, some buying. They need dollars. Dollars are not now coming to Europe because the Fed's told people like money market funds and banks not to lend to Europe because they're a basket case. That was causing a dollar credit crunch in Euroland, which was knocking on to all sorts of other problems. So what the Fed has done, all right, you can try and get excited now. What the Fed's done is said, we will swap unlimited amounts of dollars for eternity with the euro people and anybody in the world that wants to do these swaps. First, everyone concentrated on the euro, and then we might come to Japan. The Fed prints up dollars. The ECB prints up euro. They swap. Increased balance sheet both sides. Because look at it from the Fed side. They've printed up dollars. They've taken onto their balance sheet euros. Now, just believe me that the Fed isn't going to lose on this because the contract's written that they can't. But their balance sheet is going to increase as much as the swaps are swapped. They did this in 2008 and 9. And it went up an awful long way, these swaps. You remember Congress had to talk about it. I put up a few videos. But they were all repaid. Now, the chances are, the possibility is this time that they won't be repaid, because the financial system has kind of, the gears, the cogs of teeth have come off the cogs of the gearing, and it's breaking. Where it was kind of ran out of oil last time, and oil went in, the swaps and everything got going again, this time the teeth have come off some of the cogs, and oil isn't going to repair it. So there's a chance this is quantitative easing by the Federal Reserve, because dollars are being printed and put out there for euros coming onto the Fed's balance sheet, but the dollars are out there. Right? It's quantitative easing to the amount that the Europeans and the rest of the people in the world want those dollars. The bet is, or the hope is by the Fed, that it'll happen as it did in 2008 and 9. The oil will go in, and then as things get better, the oil they can drain out again by reversing the swaps. And as I say, the Fed won't lose money on this. But the chances are, due to the fact the cogs have gone in Europe, the teeth have gone on the cogs, that those dollars will stay out. And not just that, more and more dollars will more and more be needed as deflationary pressures come on and more things have to be sold. More dollars are going to be needed. Over to Japan. A couple of the teeth are starting to come off in Japan. Now, if a couple of those teeth lodge in the wrong places in Japan, they will soon be in the same situation as the Eurozone. They will need their dollar swaps, and they will need them absolutely huge. It's all based on the great unwind of the forgotten the name of the word. Sometimes I just lose the words. The something trade, where you borrow in a cheap currency. Why can't I remember something sometimes? For Japan, it's so obvious as well. Anyway, I'll put it up here. They'll need huge quantities of dollars. Now, if Europe goes and Japan goes, the rest of the world will start going, and more of these dollars will start flowing out. And till the time the Fed will be caught like the ECB is now, do they stop pumping out these dollars? They are the reserve currency of the world in a way that they're kind of obliged to do this, pumping out these dollars into the world. Because this is quantitative easing to an absolutely huge degree. If they stop, the world then runs out of the oil, and the cogs in the gearbox absolutely crunch up. But if they keep pouring them, then there's going to be too much oil, and the engine fills up with too much oil, and there's problems there as well. I'll probably leave it there. Carry trade. The world's financial markets behind the scenes are breaking. And each time it breaks, each little break, just like the analogy I'm doing of teeth coming off in a gearbox, are going and clogging somewhere else and breaking more teeth off. This action by the Fed that just sent the market up, but I don't think many people understood or understand what's going on, could be the start not just of something big, but an absolute turning point in the world history of the world economy. Because when the Fed starts with this, it just can't stop. And things like that. Good weekend. Bye.